Okay, let's begin the meeting. The Lehigh County Authority Board of Directors meeting of June 27th, 2022. The meeting is being held in hybrid fashion with board members present in the boardroom as well as board members present on Zoom interface. The public is welcome to attend, and everybody should be able to hear each other for duration. If not, let us know, and we can take the corrective action. Have a roll call of the board of directors, please.
Before we do roll call, I think that our hearing
All right, hang on a minute.
device is giving us some feedback, it sounds like.
Plan B. Got another one.
Stand by. Okay.
The trade is. You get feedback between the two of them right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Speaking of hearing. Okay? Yep. All right, good.
All right. Roll call of the board members: Brian Noggle,
Here.
Scott Bieber, Richard Bonner,
Here.
Norma Cusick, Ted Lyons, Kevin Baker,
Yes.
Linda Rosenfeld,
Here.
Jeff Morgan,
Here.
Amir Famili.
Here.
We have 6 board members present. That is a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. The board packet was distributed in advance to all board members electronically as well as hard copy. We did have a revision to the resolutions, and you should have all received a copy of that either here present or electronically. Did anybody not receive that, the package? Okay, let's proceed then with the review of the agenda and any need for executive sessions.
All right, so Brian, you already mentioned the adjustment to the agenda with the resolution being changed, adjusted slightly to remove the suburban division water tapping fees. So today we're only focused on the wastewater tapping fees. That was the only change to the agenda.
That change was made on the website as well.
It was, yes. So the posted agenda is the corrected agenda. And we do have an executive session planned for today following the close of the regular meeting. That'll be to discuss potential litigation or potential legal matters.
All right, thank you. Jot that down. Okay, let's move on to the approval of the minutes from the June 13th, 2022 Board of Directors meeting.
I make a motion, we accept the minutes as published for the June 13th meeting.
Motion made by Dick and seconded by Amir. Approval of the minutes as written. Any questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Ayes have it. Thank you. Moving on now to public comments. This is the opportunity for anybody in the public to make any comments on issues that are not on the agenda. Anybody have any comments? Thank you. Action items, finance and administration, we have a resolution number 6-200. Does that change to 1?
No, it's still 6-2022-2.
-2, okay. Presentation on that?
Yeah, so this is the resolution that was revised. And so the resolution is now focused on the suburban division wastewater tapping fees alone. And there's an exhibit related to that. We have Dave Bush from Keystone Alliance Consulting here to help walk us through it, as well as Ed Klein, who worked with Dave to develop these fees. You guys want to make some comments?
Yeah, I'll just throw, I mean, we usually come to the board every year. We've been pretty good about doing it on a yearly basis, unlike the other one. And so essentially what we've done for this go around in 2022 is update the tapping fees according to the legislation for additional capital spending that occurred in 2021. So the tapping fees that you're going to hopefully approve today will be at least up to date to all of our capital spending. Like I said, through 2021. Now, essentially, in terms of big changes, I'm looking down the column and I don't see any huge changes. I see mostly 3-4% based on what's been spent. There was a bigger number when you look at Sand Springs, but we did a lot of work in that area in terms of capital spending. So that's the biggest change. Dave, you want to say anything about how you calculate it and et cetera?
Sure. Thanks, Ed. Good afternoon, everyone. The process is identical to what we have done in years past. All of the tapping fees are calculated per state statute. The calculations that we have here are the maximum allowable tapping fees under the Act. There are factors that change things, such as capital expenditures, debt financing, debt payments, and just the passage of time and the escalation of cost all impact the tapping fees. But the process that we've gone through this year is similar to what we have done in the past. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
And Dave, I have just one other minor comment, which is that one other change that occurred was we received finally 2020 census data, which affects our calculation of what equivalent dwelling unit is based on number of persons per household in each municipality. So the updated tapping fees now reflect the updated EDU value from the 2020 census data. And Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, those values will be in place then until the next census is completed.
That's correct. It's probably 10 years from now till the 2030 census is completed, and that data has been culled through down to the point where we had the necessary information for each municipality. And that's why the 2020 census data is just being incorporated now in 2022.
Okay, so are the different municipalities have different EDUs?
Yes, it's based on the number of persons per household and then value of how much wastewater flows per person to give you the per EDU value.
Is there a big variance in that?
It's not a lot. It changed by a couple of gallons here and there for the different municipalities, but because the tapping fee is calculated on a per gallon basis and then calculated to a per household basis, it changes the value of the fee based on the census data. Even if the fee stayed the same per gallon, the per EDU charge would change because of the updated census data.
Okay. Any questions? This is a resolution, Mr. Solicitor, would you read the resolution?
Well, the resolution is titled "A Resolution Establishing the Various Components of the Lehigh County Authority Capital Recovery Fees for the Various Suburban Division Wastewater Systems." It's difficult to summarize all this beyond what's been said already. This was circulated beforehand, so you've had information for a while. The new rates will be effective July 1st, 2022. So I think this is ready
Per attachment A that we have in our back.
The rate has been communicated to the ratepayer.
The rate actually, in most cases, actually goes to through the municipality, then to the new it's for new connections.
Sure.
So it's as new connections happen, they pay this charge. So this will get updated on our website with an updated rate schedule, and the municipalities already have this information too.
Thank you.
Okay, need a motion?
Move this resolution be approved. Second one.
Okay, motion made by Linda, seconded by Jeff. Approval of this resolution. Any questions? Do a voice count, please. Post vote.
Certainly, this is a vote for approval of resolution 6-2022-2. Brian Noggle,
Yes.
Dick Bonner,
Yes.
Kevin Baker,
Yes.
Linda Rosenfeld,
Yes.
Jeff Morgan,
Yes.
Amir Family.
Yes.
That's 6 yes votes. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to water topics. We have one for approval. It's water filtration plant filter upgrade project. It is the blue documents in our board package. And digitally, it is pages 100 through 103.
Online, it's actually been updated to page
Makes
39
sense. Okay, page 39. And on.
and on. Yes, so this, Chuck.
Yes, thanks, Lizzo. This memo is for authorization for design phase for the filter upgrade project. The existing 8 filters at the water filtration plant are over 70 years old. They've reached the end of their useful life. This project was cited as a near-term project in the water plant master plan a few years ago. So it's a very important project and very important for the asset management to mitigate the risk of failure of the existing clay under drains. So we had Hazen and Sawyer, we retained to perform preliminary engineering and conceptual design, which was submitted to the city in early May. And as of last Friday, I received approval from the city for this major capital project. So we'd like to continue with Hazen as the engineer for design phase. They have significant experience in water treatment. They've done quite a bit of work at the water filtration plant. They're familiar with the plant. And I feel we got a very decent design price for them for design and bid phase services. So the status of the project, like I said, we did receive approval from the city for the preliminary design, which outlines what the basis of design is to consist of. And now we'd like to proceed with design. And basically what the upgrade entails, it's replacement of the existing clay under drain system. You have to remove the filter media first, and then installation of an air scour backwash system, which normally is just a water backwash, which we use now. This adds air that is more effective at removing the coagulant coating from the media granules. And this is to replace controls as well and SCADA integration. So I was really looking forward to getting going with this project. And the timeline for this project is going to be a 2-year construction. Construction sequencing is going to be very important. It's going to take about a month and a half to take each filter down. There's 8 filters. It has to be done from September to May when the water demand is less than the seasonal summer demand. So it's going to be a 2-year project finishing by May 2025. So attached to the board memo, I have a capital project authorization for the amount of $239,792, of which the Hazen design fee is $199,792. And then there's a professional service authorization attached to that as well. Anybody have any questions?
Sure, just quick questions. I mean, definitely is needed things to do when those filtrations are about 11 years old, but more than they're 20 years old. Do you anticipate higher throughput with the new filtration
Yes.
system or better quality of water and controlling the QC?
Yes, we anticipate higher throughput, approximately 25%, able to push through the filters. And that's going to be really important for design phasing, because maybe after the project is about 50% complete, we can actually take 2 filters down at once based on the amount of throughput that we can get through there and possibly shorten the construction duration.
And that efficiency is because those clay particles been coated with the coagulant and does not have enough porosity for water.
Yeah, and the stainless steel, the proposed stainless steel under drain system is just more efficient. And then with the air scour, we can clean the filter media more readily and just get better performance.
Thank you.
Yes.
If I might make a comment, wanted to make sure the board is aware that this is a project that the city of Allentown has committed American Rescue Plan funds toward. So just want to acknowledge the city's support for this project, not only through the approval of the conceptual design, as Chuck mentioned, but they are providing some funding to help mitigate rate impact of this project.
Because I'm surprised that there's nobody online from the city,
Yeah.
which is unusual.
They're busy too, so.
Okay.
And I do have to point out, there's one error on the PSA. The total authorization today should be the sum of 199,000 plus the 38,000 and change. It should be 238,691. I transposed a number from the capital project authorization in error.
238,691.
Yes, sir.
Any questions from the board? Any other questions? Need a motion? A motion made by Amir and seconded by
Second.
Linda. Okay. All right, this is for capital project authorization for the water filtration plant filter upgrade project design and bid phase. Total amount of $238,691 with a professional services authorization included to Hazen and Sawyer for $199,792. Motion made. Let's take a roll call vote, please.
All right, this is a vote for the approval of the filter project design and bid phase. Brian Noggle,
Yes.
Richard Bonner,
Yes.
Kevin Baker,
Yes.
Linda Rosenfeld,
Yes.
Jeff Morgan,
Yes.
Amir Kamili.
Yes.
6 votes.
Thank you. All right, now under wastewater, we have two items. First is the regional sewer capacity and wet weather planning. Engineering and program support seeking approval is the goldenrod in the pages in our board packet, and digital packet pages
Starts on 43.
starts on 43. All right, thank you.
Thank you. And just a note of, actually, I'll let Phil do the introductions. This is a Phil presentation as we're getting used to learning about 537 Phil, and you have a few guests with you.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, with us today, we have two representatives from AECom, Chris Kerr and Ralph Ashbourne. They'll get into some of the history about AECom's prior role with 537. And then we're going to talk about what the next couple of years look like. So before Chris kicks it off, I did tell him to try to make it as simplified as possible because it gets pretty complicated pretty quickly. So Chris, if you get too into the weeds, I'll try to stop you.
Yeah, sounds good.
We do have a presentation that was posted on our website and shared with the board in advance. So I'm going to go ahead and screen share.
Yeah.
All right.
Just recognize that the board has not been involved in all the details of the different alternatives being considered. So when it comes to, we might be asking a bunch of questions, just what the engineers are speaking.
We appreciate the opportunity to be here today. As Phil Lisa mentioned, I'm Chris Curran, Project Director with AECom, and excited to be here today to talk about our support through Act 537 and the next steps that we're involved with here. So today I'm going to try to keep it real high level, respecting time, but review what's been done to date, essentially looking backwards, 2013 to 2019 timeframe. Talk a little bit about program manager's role and what our job will be during this. Also talk about some of the fresh thinking, the concepts that are being considered now, ultimately for the most effective overall solution for wastewater needs. Talk about some of the immediate drivers in 2022, and then touch upon more details of our proposal and schedule. So looking back, it started, essentially in 2013 timeframe. There were a number of different studies, but at the time there was a need for 4 MGD of additional capacity. So it was looked at adding capacity at the pretreatment plant through a tertiary process that would have a direct discharge. And there's a couple different options looked at where that would go, but one of which being the Lehigh River. When that was evaluated, you'll see mention of 4.9 as an example. What we're looking at is the dry weather flow that the system manages on a daily basis, and then the second number being the wet weather capacity. Wet weather is a big driver here in the conveyance system for LCA. And at the time, looking at 4 MGD, it was concluded there were some modest cost reductions in pulling that out of the collection conveyance system. But really didn't move the needle in terms of economic effort. It was more cost effective to add 4 MGD down at Klein's Island. So that, essentially the project was put on pause for a while, especially recognizing there wasn't an immediate need for the next 5 years for any capacity expansion. So in dealings with DEP, the documents were finalized for the time being, essentially put on the shelf, and then a focus shifting more to wet weather management, which is really the driver here for the system.
And Chris, before you move on to the next slide, I do want to reiterate that 4.9 solution, that was the only detailed solution for the pretreatment plant back in 2013. So there was no, there was no 430, which we'll get into. It was 4.9. That was it.
So looking more, in the interim period, the 2019 to 2021, which is the more recent efforts involved, what had transpired was around 2016, Boston Beer started making projections of their future needs and what was being seen at the pretreatment plant. And that was going to drive a lot of upgrade. They have a very high strength wastewater, as I think everyone's familiar with, and really dictated the needs of the capacity of the plant. There was also overriding that period of wet years, 2018, 2019 period that I know you're all familiar with. It was really driving a lot of wet weather challenges. And then at the time, there was also DEP came out with their statement about prohibiting any kind of blending at Klein's Island in terms of bypassing flow around a biological process. So those were all important elements during that period. And so reactivation of planning was done to take another look at things, before we looked at that 4.9, what else could be, options, opportunities looking forward. So one of the items, just to reference, there was a hydraulic overload at the plant in 2019 where we exceeded the max flow for 3 consecutive months. And as a corrective measure for that, there was an interim Act 537 done and a corrective action plan that was able to restore the ability to move forward with planning modules in the meantime. And as part of that, water quality management Part 2 permit, which is what the WQM there is, increased the hydraulic capacity of Klein's Island from 40 to 44.6 MGD, which was important. The DEP regulates plant capacity by hydraulics and load, so it's important to look at them separately. So at the time, a revisit to direct discharge was looked at, and one thought was increasing the flow of that direct discharge. So then we looked at 11.7 MGD, and that included the projections that reached pretreatment plant plus a reversal of the Spring Creek pump station to bring more flow from the Western Lehigh area to pretreatment plant to take advantage of the asset there. And also by doing that, we're able to get a lot of that wet weather out of the conveyance system. And that's what that 30 MGD component for wet weather. So we looked at that to evaluate, okay, what can this do? Will this be more cost effective overall? And while it did take away a lot of the requirements of the collection or the conveyance system improvements, there was a big cost for that at the pretreatment plant in terms of adding that capacity, going from the current 5.75 up to 11.7, as well as the 30 MGD. So that, the findings from that was, it did move the needle with conveyance, but it added that extra cost. And, while it wasn't it was more expensive than the improvements to remain at Klein's Island. They were still close enough that it was worth advancing it and still continuing to evaluate it as part of the Act 537. There's also some weigh in from DRBC. In the background, there's a lot of regulatory discussion and getting their input on what will be involved with that. And there would be a trade of load from Klein's Island up to the pretreatment plant. And this would add a lot of potential costs with permitting and impacts down on Klein's Island. So at the time, the 11.7 was an option, but there's more to come. That's what we'll talk about next with the fresh ideas. But first, just our role overall as program manager. There's a lot of important facets associated with this. The work Kleinfelder is doing down at Klein's Island, Arcadis in the conveyance collection system, Jacobs with the pretreatment plant, Arrow with their role in the interim Act 537 and going forward with the formal 537. Our involvement, a lot of coordination between all the different consultants, looking at it holistically, providing value engineering, independent review of the different evaluations, regulatory considerations and drivers, looking at it overall holistically, and then ultimately integrating all the findings and reporting and recommendations, which will be a main component of the technical portions of the Act 537. So just an example, program management, with very large utilities, it's often a standard, as example, Blue Plains, DC Water, but it also can be used by other utilities when there's a specific program that needs to be done that's complex and a lot of moving parts. And so a program manager can come in just to support and, have a different role, whether it's, doing components of the program and just helping make sure that the program all comes together properly to give, at the end, the best path forward on this specific program project. So as far as our fresh thinking and what we're looking at right now, moving forward at the pretreatment plant, we recognize there's advantages in all of these assets. If you look at it, step back and look at a regional perspective, the pretreatment plant offers real robust organic removal, and we see that evidenced in the water reaching Klein's Island and the capacity that's available there from an organic perspective. There's ample capacity that still exists, and that's because pretreatment is doing such a good job at pre-treating the higher strength wastewater that reaches it. Nitrification, in order to meet new outfall in a direct discharge scenario, there will be nitrification requirements for pretreatment plant, and that's a significant cost to add at pretreatment plant. So it's really is doubling the cost to go to the nitrification step versus just maintaining it in a pretreatment with organic and solids removal. At Klein's Island, however, there's robust nitrification already there. It's very efficient too in a trickling filter type format from an energy perspective, and it's doing a really good job down there. So a very good asset at Klein's Island. And as mentioned, there's ample organic capacity there, as a benefit from what the pretreatment plant has been doing historically. As far as considerations on the conveyance system upgrades, when we were looking at this in the earlier tweaks, reducing the size of the new facilities, it may save a marginal amount, but if we're able to eliminate major conveyance, they're very significant dollars. So we wanted to make sure that we incorporate that into the different scenarios we're looking at to make sure we can take advantage of that.
I just want to jump in here, Chris. I know this is a Ralph. Ralph likes to point this out every time we talk.
Ad nauseum.
You've probably heard of the Sister Park Pump Station mentioned over the past decade. That was identified in 2014 as a need. So we have the existing park pump station, and then thinking has always been to put another pump station next to it. And what Ralph is really trying to find is how can we eliminate that sister park pump station. So far, we haven't found an answer quite yet, but we're working towards that.
That kind of gets to the newer items there at the bottom around fresh thinking. And at the basis of this, we're trying to leverage both the assets in the pretreatment plant and Klein's Island to most cost effectively provide the best overall solution. And so as part of that, we're looking at some deviations off that, the number 430. So that would be direct discharging 4 MGD, but having the ability to direct discharge up to 30. So we're again recognizing that advantage of bringing the flow out of the conveyance system, but only doing a future direct discharge on a dry weather basis of 4 MGD instead of close to 12 MGD. Was one concept. And then even evolving from that is, okay, we have all this capacity at Klein's Island organically, let's look at a 0. So we're not going to have any direct discharge of dry weather, just wet weather. So we really just want to, still use that asset down at Klein's Island for all the dry weather organic needs, and then divert as much as we can. And that was the 0-30, 0-40 scenarios, which of what we're going to be focusing on now, to try to even remove more and get to that incremental where we can eliminate and not just reduce in scale. So as part of that, also looking at the pretreatment plant, the master plan that's ongoing right now, how can we value engineer in and look at different alternatives that are most cost effective overall, and truly exploring the regional capacity needs of the system. So
Don't you have to wait for your modeling result till you look at which direction you're gonna go?
for what the ultimate size and scaling of it is, and we're getting really close to that now with where Arcadis's model is. So I'll touch upon a couple capacity expansions that can be done inherently at Klein's Island that can get us up higher wet weather capacity, but there is a point where they'll be needing additional high biological treatment for wet weather flows.
And I always think the easy way to think about this is, the Western Lehigh interceptor, there's two options, right? It's either we parallel gravity or we do a force main, wet weather force main. So if you want to simplify that, that's as simplified as you can be, force main or gravity.
And really, stepping out of that, the fact that the 4 MGD that's been on the table for a while is really not so much a capacity need as a contractual need that we're looking at. So if we're, because there is a lot of inherent I&I in the system that's just dilute water, if we can reduce it through I&I reductions, there's really not a capacity need from an organic perspective at Klein's Island. We're well under the Chapter 94 thresholds for that.
So when you said force main, you meant a new force main from the pretreatment plant?
Yes.
Okay. And that's to go to the Lehigh River because you want to get out of the Little Lehigh watershed upstream.
Yes.
Has there been any thought of trying to get to like the Jordan Creek watershed where there are other, wastewater discharges as opposed to trying to go all the way to the Lehigh?
Yeah, I don't know how far back to go, but when we did the study back in 14, 15, and 16, we had three options on the table. We also had land application, which was avoiding a discharge, and we had a much shorter force main run to the Jordan Creek, but the concern was that it was in, the concern by the Department of Environmental Protection was that it was in direct communication. The Jordan Creek is a shrinking stream. It's in direct communication with drinking water wells. And at the time we said, for several $100,000, we could do a geological study to confirm or disprove that. But if all we do is prove it, we're back where we were. And the conclusion was, and also there was a lot of interest on the part of environmental groups that were very interested in the Jordan Creek. And so when we rolled up the numbers, there wasn't enough driver to take that on. So in 14, 15, we ruled out, there are other issues around land application. Mainly you have very high TDS content. So the amount of real estate we needed to do dilution there was just, over the top. So those two were eliminated. And at the time we just finished with a direct comparison of going to the Lehigh versus and apples to apples, 4 MGD expansion of both. That was the scope at the time. 4 MGD expansion at Klein's Island versus 4 MG of direct discharge, just a partial treatment of the plant. And at the economics, as Chris already touched on, we were able to reduce but not eliminate, so we got an incremental savings in the collection system. And we spent a lot of money at the pretreatment plant to get to direct discharge capability mostly for the reason he said, if you want to nitrify, you have to double the size of your plant. I mean, we can go crawl through the technical reasons for that, but it's very clear that that's the case. So that's why we talk about, we really didn't move the needle with a 4.9 case. And now in the fresher thinking, we've come back and went, oh, wait a minute. We don't need to do the full treatment and discharge. We go to 4 or even 0 on the dry days for the organic issues. And we can still move the needle by doing 30 or even 40 if the difference between 30 and 40 was elimination instead of reduction. Chris I'm setting him up. He's actually.
But Jordan Creek also had a higher stream classification.
Right. It's a small stream, so we were a big part of it, if you would. Good comment. Thank you.
That was before my time, so thank you.
I'm a historian, so sometimes I get to talk.
Right there with you.
So this just represents a schematic of the existing system, pre-treatment plant flowing down with the 2 bypasses, reaching Klein's Island and the Lehigh, just kind of for illustrative purpose of the current flows, current hydraulic capacity at Klein's Island, peak capacity. You can see 44.6 that we just mentioned based on the water quality permit, and peak flow capacity present in the range of 87 MGD. So some of these concepts, well, first, if we were to go the base case scenario that we're talking about, all flow to Klein's Island, this just for the purpose of illustration, the red shows all of the conveyance improvements that would be needed along that corridor, paralleling to convey that flow, those peak flows down to Klein's Island. So it just illustrates there's a lot of work that would be needed to get the water down without the direct discharge component, and a lot of costs associated with it.
I do want to make one more comment, Chris. It's important to remember that the planning horizon is through 2050. But this particular 537, the implementation schedule is through 2035. So the plan is going to have a schedule, construction schedule through 2035.
So when we're talking about this 040, this just to try to illustrate how we're getting the flow out of the conveyance system so that we don't have to do all those improvements highlighted in red. So you can see from the pretreatment plant, we'll now have the full wet weather capacity of 15 MGD being pumped. And then we'll have Spring Creek pumping at 25 MGD around the conveyance system, combining with that effluent from the pretreatment plant, and then all going to Klein's Island where a high rate treatment process could be constructed with discharge to the Lehigh. And you can see in the red line there, the ADF is average daily flow. So that would be the dry weather flows, the ability to still send them to Klein's Island, as I mentioned, and to get them also out of the conveyance system, just so we don't have issues around Trexlertown, that area of the system. We would get even dry flows bypassed around, and it would still go through Klein's Island's main process and share infrastructure. So there'll be oversized pipes for the peak flow, but we'd still be able to send the daily flow to Klein's Island as well. And then the next.
So I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but just curious. So big picture, the high rate treatment would be part-time. It'd have to be basically, it could be off for June, July, and we get a hurricane in August, and you're operating it, a week or two at a time. That's the way it's.
It would be very infrequent. So as you can see the bottom right there at Klein's Island, some of those inherent improvements that could be done could get the main plant at Klein's Island up to 120 MGD peak capacity. So there would still be, that would be the bulk of the rain event flows that would still be able to process through the main plant. The really infrequent high flow conditions is where, above 120, and that's where we're eager to review the model runs to see what that true flow reaching Klein's Island will illustrate. So if it's above 120, and the high rate processes can be phased in as well. So you don't necessarily have to add a big chunk. It could be done phases to coincide with I&I reductions. So if you're able to manage it through more cost-effective I&I, then you don't need to build as much high-rate treatment. So these would be in out years because we would have the initial 120 already in store and operational in the more near term.
So that would be, and then the new force main, that would also be for that component, that would just be used part-time as well?
We'll be sending the dry weather flow, on a daily basis, but
Okay,
then
gotcha.
the Spring Creek already pumps around. So we can look at, there's some flexibility there, whether we just, maintain the existing force main for certain periods. Or Spring Creek would need a pump station improvement to go up to 25 MGD, but that's what the modeling shows as the peak flow to Spring Creek, so.
And Mayor, to your point, Arcadis will have an answer on what that peak flow number is later this fall. We don't know what that number is, something above 120, but we don't know what it is.
Does the stuff that goes out, the high rate treatment, does that meet the same load requirements as the MPDS permit, or is it a different standard for that or something?
That's our understanding, that DEP will, because we're going through the Kleins Island plant, actually through a permitted outfall 002 that's just mothballed right now. It has already the criteria for discharge on the max day, average day. So we already have an understanding of what the permit there will be.
And, sorry, does this get into blending and things like that, or is this completely separate?
It would be biological treatment. It would meet the DEP's requirements for biological treatment.
Are you guys looking at blending as a potential? No, it's out. Okay.
Does that get covered in 537 at all as an option, or is it just not even gonna be covered at all?
You're supposed to cover all the available options, and it's going to be a very short treatment about DEP prohibiting blending, and we'll move on.
The city at one time was challenging that, right? Did that go away, that lawsuit, all of that? They were, because it's a significant cost reduction if you can blend.
If I could just, I think the thinking is the upgrades that are possible to increase the peak capacity to 120 MGD are in the same cost ballpark as the blending. So they've kind of found a different way.
Okay, that's fine.
And much less than the equalization concept that was previously on the table.
It's important to note that bioactive flow process, of course, that's not the selected alternative, but that could be, that's been permitted by the department already in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, we've used the shorthand legal blending because it does just enough biological treatment by their standards. They recognize it as a parallel secondary treatment, bioactive.
So in doing this 040 vein of thinking, the benefits are eliminate those costly pretreatment improvements that were in previous versions being considered for direct discharge to meet permit criteria for discharge, eliminate parallel interceptors, especially in environmentally sensitive areas, eliminate the little sister park pump station and force main, and again, leverage existing assets and the outfall of Kleins Island. Some of the things that really need to get further looked at and vetted, we think they'll be offer some cost advantages to consider. This just shows some of the vetting that was done previously with the effluent force main. I know we mentioned it earlier. We whittled down to two alternatives actually at the end of 2020, went through a series of workshops with LCA, looking at viability of options cost. This second one, the one shown in the blue, actually runs right by Spring Creek pump station. So it's a little bit longer than the purple alignment. But in this case now with the 040, it gives that benefit of now it'll be a lot easier to pick up flow from Spring Creek. So there will be a short pump station or force main connection from Spring Creek into that. And now a smaller force main from LCA's pretreatment plant to the Spring Creek location. And then at the end, they kind of follow the same route down to Kleins Island for discharge. And, again, the boxes there show the benefits of the concept and reduction of conveyance needs.
Yeah, of course, that hasn't been confirmed yet, but
Right.
that the hope is that we're going to try to do our best to eliminate that sister park pump station.
The purple is a completely new line.
Yes, both of these, the purple and the blue would be
Completely
new
different.
effluent lines, yes.
And one is in wetlands and the other one is long.
Well, they're both follow road corridors right away. The interceptor improvements, if they were to parallel, would obviously remain, in stream corridors and more environmentally sensitive areas.
But there's much more on the light blue than on the purple.
Yeah.
I think the shortest route is that purple one. I think that was 11 miles.
Yeah.
And then the blue one is 12, so it's an extra mile.
So that's coming up. So as far as some of the current areas that we're looking at, working with Arcadis on the conveyance system, as mentioned, the model calibrations and simulations are about to start here. So that's going to be an excellent tool looking forward. Common Sense I&I program, we talked about, there's these peaks that we see in the historic hydrographs or, what the flow looks like over the course of time, where we could try to eliminate some of those really high short duration peaks with effective inflow reduction into manholes and lids. And that should be just a common theme throughout the approach, just to get that really extensive peak flow out of the system, and then how to manage peak flow at Klein's Island when it arrives there. At the pretreatment plant, as mentioned, the master plan's underway, working with that, looking at the alternatives. We're also been in technical conversations with Jacobs regarding that. Also having discussions with Boston Beer. I think just today we got some, projections on their forecasted loads, which are really, critical into seeing how that'll impact pretreatment plant. But then also thinking, beyond that, what else can be done at the pretreatment plant. One concept is renewable natural gas. We have this high organic strength load coming into the plant. You could do an anaerobic process, create methane, and potentially, have a recovery of that energy and costs by generating natural gas that's actually, could be put into the distribution system. Very good option. There's others such as equalizing flows there to just try to balance operations. So there's a lot of things on the table. With Kleinfelder, we kind of touched upon earlier, there's these phase 1 improvements to get the plant initially to 100 MGD from 87 to 100 that can be done, but then also that concept of getting to 120, which is doing some repiping within the plant, and instead of going in series through their trickling filters, run them in parallel. There's some other components involved with that, but it's a cost-effective way to get to that 120 capacity. And then AECOM offering a lot with the regulatory guidance, meeting with DRBC, DEP, developed a revenue tool that can be used by LCA to just simulate how these different program alternatives impact LCA and all the signatories. Also vetting, the pretreatment plant and Klein's Island optimization, conveyance optimization. And again, looking beyond that 120 MGD at Klein's Island, that we anticipate with the 040 scenario, and we mentioned bioactive flow is one concept that we've been supporting with.
There's on the renewable natural gas at the pretreatment plant. We looked into that before. Is there anything new on that is still a new technology or?
Yeah, so in my spare time, I'm one of the energy discipline managers for AECOM. So it's kind of my bailiwick. Renewable natural gas, basically you've got biogas, so it's from a renewable source and it dramatically reduces your carbon footprint. You can approach energy neutrality for the operation of the site, wastewater being very energy intensive. But the key is that you have you'll call it a 6 MGD facility in the pretreatment plant, but because of the organic loading, it's more like a 60 MGD plant. And that's all gas that right now you're flaring. Okay, so you kind of go, isn't there something else we can do with that? I think you know where I'm going, right? Well, if you put in the anaerobic pretreatment of brewery waste, which is very popular now, in fact, oldest continuously operating brewery in North America is just down the road, right? And they just put anaerobic pretreatment in, or anaerobic digestion, because brewery waste really lends itself to that. And so that is gonna double your gas production. So now you're very well up the economies of scale track, and it should be a very attractive project. There is uncertainty associated with it because it's an artificial market. You're basing a lot of the economics on credits. And every time you have an administration change in Washington, you have to wonder what happened. Well, the credits survived a Republican administration, and now we're back to a very pro green programs administration, and they've carried on through that. So typically when we do these economics for a client, we talk payback, just like you would in private industry, because if you go, I can see this program lasts another 5 years, and by the way, you've recovered all your investment by then. So if the program dies, it was a push, and if it keeps going, you're going to be coining money. It can look like that.
Well, did you say that the brewery was actually doing the generation themselves, and would that be something that Boston Beer might
It's a
take?
very good question. First off, I want to give Lisa credit because in the last couple of years, we've been doing these forecasts that we called Boston Beer the 500-pound gorilla in the room because we didn't know what they were going to do. You've all seen where they were paying penalties and going above their contract amount, and now they've dropped back down. And we said, hey, we can't work on that basis. And they have come back now with a more formal forecast. We just got it. I haven't even looked at it. And so dealing with them is a very key part of this. And in our last conversations with them, we talked about, so who should do that? Where's the sweet spot? Should we do that or should LCA do it? And the knee-jerk reaction is you've already got all this gas you're not using. And for economies of scale and also footprint, they don't have the space up there. The presumption is that a anaerobic pretreatment step would go at LCA as just looking at an economic boundary around the whole both operations. It would still be preferred, but more to vet there.
Aren't there other options too? You could look at fuel cells or combined heat and power, generate your own electricity.
Actually, the current master planning effort includes a module. Chuck's master planning effort with Jacobs for the pre-treat. It includes a module for at least a high-level look at combined heat and power. Because of my role in AECOM, which is North American, not just local, the last half dozen studies we've done, RNG, renewable natural gas, wins hands down against CHP every time.
Well, yeah, the benefit to the CHP is kind of your own little island. You're not dealing with I think the RINs they're called, the credits, the green energy credits and all of that stuff.
You can control your own destiny better, I would say.
Yeah, you definitely generate it, you sell it back on the grid or you use it and you're there.
I'm not saying that just based on my prior experience, you could rule it out. Every site is unique, really.
Yeah,
And you have to do a case by case thing.
Right. And UGI needs to be able to accept it and all that fun stuff. So.
But when we have looked at it, again, a number of other wastewater facilities comparable size, we asked the question, okay, I've got all this biogas. I'll still use some in my boilers to preheat for my digesters and the rest will go to RNG, or I'll send it all to RNG and I'll import natural gas, which energy balance wise, that didn't change to your carbon footprint. And the answer always comes back, import the natural gas, send everything to RNG. So just background.
Thank you.
Sorry if I took too much. I'm an engineer and squirrel.
So just, not to go into the detail here, but there are a lot of alternative considerations with the two scenarios, the conveyance improvements versus the force main. We touched upon a little of them, but, construction challenges, permitting, certainly permitting, construction along the stream corridors are, be very challenging. Community drivers, the direct discharge will have some more traffic impacts with the force main, maybe shorter lived. whereas Klein's Island approach may be more, impact to recreational corridors along the parkway. Sequencing, considerations, we want to look at that as well. How do you piece this all together over a 10-year program, as Phil mentioned, and then flexibility.
Yeah, I don't want to gloss over that last part there, Lisa, that schedule acceleration. Yeah, so if you stick with the gravity, it's going to take longer to construct versus the force main. In theory, it would be quicker. So that's another major variable we have to balance.
So, just in terms of the next major activities, at least we're all working towards the March 2025 submission of Act 537. So there's some of these steps along the way, the preliminary screening of alternatives, followed by final alternative analysis, selection of solution, and then finalizing the plan. Our proposal, on the next slide just shows, the key points around, this immediate window with the screening of alternatives, continue the coordination, development of the preliminary screening of alternatives, refinement of these wet weather scenarios, doing technical evaluation vetting, the 3 main drivers there shown. There's some process modeling included in our proposal, both at pre-treatment plant and Klein's Island, to vet some of these technical scenarios that we've included. Looking a little more closely at that outflow too, with a preliminary evaluation design for how that would look, as well as at Spring Creek Pump Station, compiling all the opinions of probable costs and then updating them, because the market has definitely been volatile with supply chain issues and just construction volatility in the market over the last year or so. So we intend to update that towards the end of this year. And that's included as well. Maintenance of Act 537 program schedule. We've developed an overall program schedule just with all the different facets that are involved. The revenue tool evaluations mentioned, and then ultimately documenting all these key findings and tech memos that'll be used in support of the overall Act 537 plan submission in March of 2025.
Thank you, Chris. And if there's any other questions for Chris, now's the time. They're going to step out. They're going to step out after this.
Quick question for you. Sure. Which one of those milestones that you were talking about to deliver really are giving you, keep you up at night? That might be the cause for delay of the project.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different factors associated with it. Kind of towards the end, when you have to get all the buy-in and sign off, can be a lengthy, administrative process that can be challenging. But, we're in good hands with Lisa and LCA, pulling that all together. So that would be a critical component. We'll start with ample time to make sure that we meet that deadline. I think now with the model, the ability to zone in on more of the technical solution can start, be accelerated.
We had that 160 up there. That's a nominal number because it was the number we used in 2016, and we've all been on the edge of our chair for the modeling to kick in, and Arcadis is on track they are the critical path schedule, okay? And they're on track to give us the key input that we need, which is what is the peak flow to Klein's Island? Because a lot will flow from that. There's a very good example. And then they're willing co-conspirators on, so wait a minute, let's turn the question around. Don't tell me how small a little sister got. Tell me what it takes to eliminate. And it could be that the force main will do it. And if it doesn't, we'll probably come back and do common sense part 2, because all those I&I improvements are 10 cents on a dollar off. So there could be an iterative process here, but that's our focus.
Thank you.
Other board questions?
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I bless my own day.
So Lisa, that being said, we have the proposal in front of us. The next phase of Act 537 for AECom. And you have 270,000. And then a CPA request in the amount of 310,000. That's the main thrust of the request today. Any further questions?
Refresh my mind on the February contract we had with them. We gave them an addendum in February. Here we are, June, making another order.
Yes, so they were authorized in August of 2020 to do the focus on the pre-treatment plan. That got them through October of 2021. And they needed another $100,000 in February of this year to get through June of this year. So the balance is the 270. They'll get
Was
them.
it identified up through June at that time?
Yes. Yeah, the 100,000 was through June, yes.
And so this one is through February of 2023?
Yeah, roughly, yeah.
Years.
Yeah, roughly.
6-7 months.
Yep. And then I
More
anticipate
after that.
one more for them. Through September.
To be determined, and it's the flow, good fun, but flow issue kind of keeps changing as we come up with new ideas and data comes in from the modeling of that.
Yes, and then
It's not totally predictable.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, as you can see, the situation evolves by the month.
So that being said, I think it would be helpful if they could come in, not like at the very end. It would be nice, like 6 months from now, if the situation has evolved, that they could bring us up to speed so we can ask questions.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And the initial part of it, that would be good. Not that we have to be wound up in the details. I try and bite my tongue because I start asking lots of silly questions, but that would be good because this was really helpful to see that what they were looking at as far as the concept of changing from complete treatment and force main to
And what
a
the
combination of things, right? Yeah, that helps, I think, as opposed to just getting it all at the end, a final result.
We had gotten a little bit away from having our consultants come in because of the pandemic and,
Sure.
All of that. But I think having Arcadis come in 2 meetings ago was helpful to talk about modeling. And now this is a little bit more on the treatment side and overall program management. It makes sense to keep us all
Just such a big project.
informative. Yeah.
Do we need to hear more from maybe Jacobs as far as changes that envision the pretreatment plan and how that would disrupt?
Yes. So as a refresher, they were authorized for the first ever master plan. I think we did in December 2021 now. So the development of the master plan is a little difficult because of Boston Beer projections just coming in now. So yes, they will present something this fall. It's important.
Okay, good. I think that's the message, is that we have these major components. We heard today, we had the project management
Program manager.
And
program.
he doesn't have a speaking role today, but to want to highlight, Mike Schober is on the call today from Arrow. And Arrow is another one of those key players. And Mike has the unenviable job of trying to compile all the inputs from all of the consultants into something that actually meets DEP's requirements for an Act 537 submission, and then walking us through the approval process, the initial approval process, and making sure all the right things are signed and T's crossed, I's dotted. So Mike has been attending a lot of meetings to keep himself up to speed on everything as well.
So another major component of this is the agreements with the municipalities, the signatories, and that. And how are we managing that, I guess, other than on your shoulders? But
We're going to talk about that in another session. Yeah, but it's
another
being,
key component.
it is a huge component.
You need to address it as early as possible.
Yes.
Start the discussion. I'm sure you're into that,
Yeah.
but can't wait too much longer.
But they are part of the process, right?
They are.
There's nothing should be surprised. I mean, they might disagree with the result, but they should not be surprised with any direction that they're going forward. So, right?
I think
Phil's done a tremendous job of getting all of the signatories at least on the same page with what we're doing and aware of what we're doing, aware of what we need from them in terms of data inputs. Once we get a little further along into the screening of alternatives and we see what the costs are and the sharing of the cost, that's where the rubber meets the road in terms of agreements. So we'll get to that in a future meeting.
And you can look at what's the end in mind, you know, what is the final product that has to go into DEP for the 537, and what kind of agreement we need to have for that. And the sooner they understand that, the better. All right. Any other questions? We have before us a capital project authorization, $310,000 with $270,000 in the account for continued support of program management. Jeff made the motion. Second by Linda. I think you might have. I did a little long. All right. All right, second by Linda. Approval of this capital project authorization and approval of the professional services authorization. Any questions?
Phil, I would just pass along, I thought his presentation was very well done. This is very helpful.
Very helpful. Okay, motion made and seconded. Roll call.
And so this is a vote on capital project authorization for the program management side of the Act 537 with AECom. Brian Noggle,
Yes.
Richard Bonner,
Yes.
Kevin Baker,
Yes.
Linda Rosenfeld. Yes. Jeff Morgan.
Yes.
Amir Famili.
Yes.
Thank you. That is 6 yes votes.
All right, thank you. And thank you for asking them to leave at that time. I think that's appropriate. Gives a little more freedom to discuss, even though it's being taken. They can still find out what we say, which is okay. They did a good job. All right, next item on the waste is under wastewater. It's the Park Pump Station Phase 2 upgrade. Seeking approval. It is the purple documents in our board package and its digital packet pages
Starts on page 53.
after 53 and beyond.
Okay, I'll introduce this project and then Amy Kunkel, Capital Works project engineer, she'll get into some of the details. But what this is for construction phase authorization of the Phase 2 upgrade project at Park Pump Station. And Phase 2 upgrade project consists of replacement of the original generator and associated equipment. Generator down there is about 40 years old. It's reached the end of its service life. We've observed somewhat declining performance over the years when we have it annually checked out. And it's slightly undersized for the upgraded station, the upgrade that we finished a couple of years ago. It cannot power both pumps running at full output. So it's time to replace the generator. So this project is for authorization of an electrical contract. There is a general contract associated with this project. We bid both of them. We did not receive any bids for the general contract. So we're going to rebid that contract, but we'd like to proceed, given the lead time of the generator, we'd like to proceed with authorization of the electrical contract. But lead time is close to a year. This is a natural gas. It will be a natural gas generator. So we're going to get rid of storage of diesel fuel in the Little Lehigh Parkway. We're going to run a line from UGI has a booster station up on Park Road, right up the hill. So we're going to run a service line down to the station. So we see this as a win-win. Use of the natural gas versus the cost of a diesel generator over the service life, it's advantageous to have the natural gas. Then you have the environmental benefit as well. So we saw it as a real plus to go with natural gas.
Chuck, I did have a question, or maybe a question for Mike. if you don't get any bids, can you negotiate directly?
Well,
I know there's a new law out there about that, but I didn't know what the existing one was.
yeah, the new one applies to basically construction contract services, but you have to rebid within a certain amount of time. And we talked about this on Friday. The problem actually is not with the lack of interest. The problem is the lack of interest in committing to something that's going to be mobilized a year from now, because they don't know their costs. So in order to take advantage of that, the new law, we would need someone to be willing to bid. We don't think that's going to be the case, so we'll just have to wait until next year.
I thought the new law was if somebody didn't bid, you could just directly negotiate with whoever you'd love.
Well, it is, but you have to do it twice.
You have to do it twice.
And you have to do it within a certain amount of time too.
Gotcha.
For materials, I think it's 45 days. I think for service, it's like 15 days, and
Okay,
doesn't make sense.
okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, and we did call, there were 3 general contractors that showed up at the mandatory pre-bid meeting at the site, and we did ask them why they didn't bid. And the overriding reason was just the uncertainty with the volatile economic times and supply chain issues. Their work is primarily concrete to demolish an existing slab and pour a new slab and a retaining wall. So that work is very much driven by the cost of diesel fuel, and also concrete costs has went wacky as well. So I don't see a problem with getting bids when we rebid it in 8 to 10 months from now. And making sure both contracts then synchronize. Well, once we have an idea of okay, generator is going to be delivered in 2 months, now we'll go on the street and advertise again.
Okay. Other questions?
Maybe he's going to talk a little bit about noise.
About what noise?
About noise. This is good news.
Yeah, when, you'll see in the board memo, I believe that there is a chance that we had an opportunity to save a little over $400,000. When the contract went out for bid, it was bid with the generator having a more robust sound attenuating device on it. But that device would mean that the generator would have to be shipped to another site once it was constructed, and have this, I don't want to say additional, but more robust sound attenuation to bring the noise levels down, because the noise ordinance for the city of Allentown, we weren't exactly sure if the sound attenuating device that it was originally specified would meet the requirements. So we bid it with the more robust one, and then had a change order to delete that cost if possible. In discussions with the city, we had asked them, because our interpretation of the noise ordinance was that we could meet it with the standard sound attenuation. But because of it being in the parkway and where people might be, where the distance from the generator was considered reasonable, we weren't exactly sure if Allentown would have the same interpretation that we did, and if we would need to go for a special exception. But in talking to them, I just got word on Friday that they felt that the generator, the original one with the standard sound attenuation, would not need special exception, and that it would be acceptable. So we had said in here that we would handle that. We didn't know if we would have the answer from Allentown by the time the board meeting came, but I think we would now award it with the change order to have the $414,000 cost savings.
Yeah, it was structured in the bid form as an alternate deduct. So everybody bid on the unit with the supplemental sound attenuation. The unit, the deduct unit that has sound attenuation. You know, so it's not like we're putting something with no regard down there. But the way the noise ordinance was written, we weren't sure what applied to us, because this is a piece of emergency equipment and Allentown views it as emergency equipment. And they just, in their response, they just stated that we want the weekly exercising of the generator, which is to run it for about a half an hour, that be done during work days, you know, between 8 and 5 or whatever. And that's certainly not a problem with our operations to do that.
So does that mean that 1,800,000 includes that 400,000? Or does it
Yes.
come off of that?
Yes, so the amount, and like Amy said, this just happened as of Friday, so we didn't have time to redo this, but actually the construction contract that we would be awarding, the net amount, the electrical contract is $1,415,250.25.
Who does that? That just blew my mind.
Right.
Calculation without thinking.
And the winning contractor is Alvarell Electric. They've done a lot of work for us. In fact, they're doing at the water filtration plant, the high service VFD project right now. They have good reputation. They've done lots of similar work. So we're real happy with the bid results. And they were under the engineer's estimated amount as well.
So what's the total capital project authorization? To get my calculator out.
I'll let you know in a minute here.
Oh, I have it here. If it, 1,762,726.25.
Thank you. Any questions? The wins for the environment. That's good.
And also as part of this authorization, we have consulting services, construction phase engineering from by WRA, by Whitman Record. They did the design. They also did the design of phase 1 project, and they were involved throughout construction. And then we have part-time inspection services by Callan Associates, and they serve the same role on phase 1 as well.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so I have a capital project authorization construction phase in front of us. We're a total of $1,762,726.25.
26. Wasn't the last one
25.
25? Oh, it
25.
still was 25, okay,
Bad enough going into.
right.
Okay, and a construction contract electrical to Alvarell Electric for $1,415,250.25. Also, a professional services authorization to WRA for $151,876, and a professional services authorization construction phase inspection to Cowan for $22,600. Any questions? Motion? Motion by Mayor. Linda, second that. Any other questions? Roll call vote, please.
Roll call vote for construction phase authorization park pump station generator. Brian Noggle,
Yes.
Richard Bonner,
Yes.
Kevin Baker,
Yes.
Linda Rosenfeld,
Yes.
Jeff Morgan,
Yes.
Amir Famili.
Yes.
Thank you. That is 6 yes votes.
Thank you.
All right, moving on agenda. Move to number 7, monthly financial review.
Great.
Been quiet today.
And this report starts on page 59 of the electronic
That's true.
packet. And we do have a presentation that was shared with the board. I'm going to share my screen so Ed can dig in.
So yes, we're talking about how financials looked like at the end of May. Just looking at the income statement for the month. I like it when I see all green. Each one of the funds across the board was on the positive side with respect to net income. So that meant that LCA hit positive numbers too in total. And it's also nice to see that we were better than forecast across all three as well. So obviously that results in LCA being on the positive side, on the variance side as well. Cash flow is a little bit different, not all that bad, but a little bit different. Again, we were positive across all three funds. Against the forecast, suburban water was down a little bit and wastewater was down a little bit as well. And the city was on the positive side. So it meant that LCA in total was a little bit lower in terms of cash flow for the month. Looking at year to date, all three funds positive. All three funds also positive variance on the income statement, LCA in total as well. On cash flows, suburban water was positive, a little bit lower than forecast. Wastewater was a negative number, but only down to forecast by 46,000. And on the city side, $6.5 million in cash against 6.4, so we were better by 112,000. In terms of debt service coverage ratio, the 1.90 was down a little bit to forecast, but obviously better than the internal target of 1.20, so that's good. Suburban wastewater 9.83 versus 9.62, so we were good compared to forecast. And on the city, we're in the twos now, 2.16, and that was due to 25 cents there. We have some rounding. Full year, what we look like. Positive for all three funds in terms of what it looks like for the year. As you compare to budget, so on the suburban water side for income, we're almost $600,000 better than budget. Wastewater is going to be down about 317. City division up about almost $900,000. So LCA will look good compared to budget on a total basis. And cash flows, all three funds we're saying are going to finish positive for the year. We forecasted it that way. But we believe that suburban water, wastewater, and city will all look better than budget on cash flow. Debt service coverage ratio, we think will be at 2.23, which is better than the budget for the year. We think we'll be at 10.73, which will be down a little bit to the budget on wastewater, but 1.87 versus 1.67, good news on the city. And obviously all three of them are better than our minimum threshold of 1.20. So I'd say that's a fairly nice looking table. In terms of suburban water now for the month, positive number, almost 117,000. We're only off to forecast by about $13,000 for the month. Year to date was 738,000 of income, and that puts us about almost $29,000 better than forecast for year to date. Some of the variances, well, operating revenue was down by 166, but we have made up most of that through lower operating expenses. Then the non-operating ones were small, and interest expense was down a little bit lower than we forecasted. So that helped us all get to $29,000 of favorable variance for year to date. What we think for the year, $2.7 million versus 2. So again, we think we'll finish $600,000 better than budget for the year. Wastewater. Oh, I'm sorry, water. Even forgetting how I'm on forecasting these things. So cash flows for the month, 181,000, down a little bit to the 218 by 37. Cash flows year to date, 963,000 rounded. We're down a little bit to the million plus that we forecasted by 37,000. Where most of that is coming from is lower cash from operations. That's pretty much driven by the income that we just went over. There's not much else in terms of variances for debt service financing, not much in CAPEX, and not much in investing in others. So it's pretty much right in the operation side. Cash flows for the year, we think will be 2.5. And obviously we were in the 400s for the budget. So we think we'll finish the year better by $2 million. Some key metrics, debt service coverage ratio, we've kind of talked about that, but a little bit down to the budget target, better than minimum target. Operating ratio, basically right on against budget and better than internal target. And we think we're going to finish the year at 1.30. And days cash on hand, obviously above 180 is good, 213. And we think we're going to finish the year around 270. In terms of operating revenues to forecast, we're down a little bit. We're 97 plus versus the 100% target. Operating expenses, but made up for it because we're down as well. And where we are with CAPEX is pretty much spot on the forecast. In terms of operating revenue dollars, again, down a little bit, 6 million to 6.2. We think we'll finish a little bit better than budget for the year. Operating expenses, we're down 4.8 versus the 4.9. We think we'll finish lower than budget as well. And on the CAPEX side, we're at $1 million versus $1 million. And for the year, we think we'll be at 4.6 against a budget of 5.5. And in terms of unrestricted cash balances, right now we're sitting at 5.6. That's against the forecast of 5.6 or 7 rounded. And we think we'll finish the year at 7. So that's good. Just some of the trends. I like to look at the moving average. We're at 1.252. Go back to December, it's 1.2 rounded. So the moving average looks a whole lot flatter than the actuals do. And we talked about the tapping fees in October that kind of threw that water out of kilter. In terms of operating expenses, what $1 million in when I say moving average, that's a 12-month moving average, by the way. So it's kind of obviously the same picture on operating expenses. December, we were affected by some of the lease restatements. Starting out the year, we're at 953, and it's kind of trended in that area to $1 million right now. And that's even with slightly higher water purchase costs. And where we are in CAPEX, for the forecast for the year, we think we're going to finish 84. Last year we finished 112, so we went ahead of budget. And in 2020, we're at 63. Where we are at the end of May is, well, we've got 20% of the total budget for the year covered. This year, we were at 22 last year, and in May of 2020 at 17%. So we've done better than that. Wastewater income for the month, $420,000 or $25,000 better than the forecast. For year to date, 336,000. Well, you would think I could read that sideways, but $59,000 better. Most of that coming from operating revenues, where we were up by 164 on the bottom graph. That got somewhat eroded by slightly higher operating expenses, non-operating items, and interest expense. So it's a good thing that we had the additional operating revenue to help us out for the year to date. For the full year, we think we'll be at 1.5 versus 1.8, so we're going to be down by $317,000. Cash flows, $918,000 for the month versus 963, so we're down a bit, 46,000. On cash flows year to date, we're minus 550 versus minus 504. So we're down a little bit by 45,000 on the cash flow year to date. Variances from operations, we're on the positive side, 26. We've got some good news from lower CAPEX, so that was an $87,000 favorable variance, and then debt service and financing was 8, and then some investing and other took away some of that money, and mostly because I'm taking a lot more cash out of this fund and trying to get some interest rate on it, and so I'm basically forecasting that I'm not and then doing it. In terms of metrics, 9.83 debt service coverage ratio. We're better than 1.2, slightly down to budget, and we think we will finish the year higher than, well, just a little bit lower than budget at 10.73. So we're kind of hovering there. Operating ratio, 1.07. A little bit lower. We're better than our target of 1, and we think we'll finish at 1.08, which would put us just slightly below budget. Days cash on hand, again, 160.5 consciously done, and versus 180 and 305 is where we think we'll finish the year at when I stop investing. And actually, even in this, there's a lot of opportunities coming about with interest rates that are a little bit better than the 2s and 1.5 that we've been seeing. So I'd be a liar if I didn't say I might not look at some more opportunities, because we have some nice invested balances. So operating revenues to forecast were above 102%. Operating expenses were a little bit higher, 101. And the CAPEX is down. They're at 93% versus 100. Dollars, operating revenues, 7.5 versus 7.3. We think we'll be pretty much right on line with budget, 21.1 versus 21.160. Operating expenses, almost 7 versus the 6.9, so we're up a little bit. We think we'll be up just a little bit to budget on operating expense side for the year. CAPEX score 1,207 versus 1,284. We think we'll finish at 2,381 versus a budget of 2,870. So that'll be favorable to budget. And unrestricted cash, 5,849 versus 5,894. So it's right around it. And we think we'll finish at 11,1 for the year. So again, the trends kind of flat as compared to the actuals. 1,490 came into the year at 1.5. So actually, if you look at it on a 12-month rolling average, the operating revenues got down a little bit. That gets affected by some of the credits that showed up in March. So operating expenses through May we're 1.6. We started the year at almost 1.6. So that's really not any major shifts in what's going on in that 12-month moving average, which is good. And CAPEX year to date, we think, well, for the year, we think we'll be at 83% of budget versus where we were at 180 a year ago, and year before that 97. Where we were at May is right now we're at 42%, which is higher than where we were in last year at 40 and certainly higher than 2020 at 32%. And on the city side, full income for the month, 540 versus 464. So it's good to see us on the positive side of that variance. Year to date, 3.2 versus 3.1. So we're $109,000 better than we forecasted for year to date. Couple big ones. Operating revenues negative 49 effect. We make up in operating expenses, so that's carrying that, and then non-operating is 17, and interest expense was lower as well. So we had a lot to offset the operating revenue shortfall. Income full year 3.0 versus 2.1, so almost $900,000. We think we'll finish the year compared to budget. So cash flows, 806,000 versus 780. So we're good by 26. On the year to date, 6.5 versus 6.4. $112,000 favorable, and that's almost all coming from operations side. Really not much else kicking in, a little bit more favorableness in investing in other, but really coming from ops that we just talked about from net income. Cash flow for the year, 5.9 versus 5.5. So we think we'll be up by almost $500,000 compared to budget. It's good. Just some of the metrics on the city division, 2.16, which is higher than our target, also higher than budget. Operating ratios above 2 as well, which is better than budget in target. And actually, in this case, we think we'll finish at 1.66, which will still be better than budget. Days cash on hand, 264.3, that's better than 180, and we think we'll be at 310.3. And boy, there was a time when I was really worried about getting close to that number in the city side, and so all of that's working. Operating revenues to forecast, we're down a little bit, not by much, not almost 100%. And again, operating expenses at 99%, and we're again pretty much right on with CAPEX. And yes, I'm just looking at that. So why would the block be higher if they're both 100? But we'll fix that. In terms of dollars, 20.2 versus 20.2 or 3 rounded. We think we'll finish pretty much right at budget for operating revenues for the year. Operating expenses, 10 versus 10. We think we'll spend a little bit less than budget for the year. CAPEX, we're 2,683 versus 2,597. We think we'll finish at 10.6 versus 11.3. And cash, 17 million right now. Forecast said 20, and we think we'll finish the year at almost 21. Trends again, $4 million in terms of 12-month rolling average spending. We're 3,825 coming into the year, and so the trend is not all that bad in terms of 12-month moving average in terms of operating revenue. Expenses, kind of like right there, 2.1 versus 2.1 versus. So I like what's going on with that. We're pretty much staying flat with operating expenses, despite the gyrations going on in the actual basis. And CAPEX, we think we'll hit 95 versus the 85 last year, 63%, and this is total for the year. Where we are at May is we're at 24 now, and year ago we were 20 in 2 years, 19%. So that's also a plus. Just looking at a recap on it. So there's 14 points that you can get. Suburban Waters at 11. It's just a couple of them there where cash flow was off a little bit. That's service coverage ratio and the operating revenues to forecast. Suburban Water, we had 8. And again, couple cash flow related operating ratio. But suburban water actually, I think, was 4 the last time we did this, so that's a step upward in terms of the number of points. And the city, 13 out of 14. Actually, last month they were 14 out of 14, so they just had a little slippage in operating revenues. So that is the numbers. Now I want to get into if there's something else. If you remember the cap plan that we not so long ago approved, we talked about maintaining some type of rate stability in revenue stability in the suburban water side. And to do that, we were going to need to borrow $12,180,000 worth of project money over a 3-year period. And that's coming right from the capital plan. The economic climate is changing. The feds have decided that they would be raising rates and did. And I'm concerned about further increases coming faster or sooner than later. I think now is the time to get moving on this. I have Concord Financial with me today somewhere in the virtual land that can render some comments about what we're doing, but we went out last Monday with an RFP looking for to do a financing that's bonds, and also looking at banks. So we went out with a lot of stuff for banks on Monday. I've started on a preliminary official statement, and we're trying to fast track this thing for a settlement date of August 15th. Which is pretty fast in terms of what we're used to, and it's probably going to keep me awake at night. But so really, I'm looking for a thumbs up or down on doing what I think we need to do, that we plan to do, but doing it fast.
Just to be clear, the board would then authorize the borrowing
Yes.
resolutions and all the
Yeah.
normal things that we do. This is really just a,
Yeah, this is just a directionally, I think it's something that we ought to be doing now. And yes, we would come back with a parameters resolution that would have all of the things that were in front of us when we figure out whether it's going to be a bank or bonds.
What kind of interest rates are we looking at right now? Any clue?
Chris, you want to comment about interest rates?
Changing hourly?
Yes, good afternoon. Yes, interest rates are continuing to go up. But we are getting a lot of good interest at where the rates are currently. I think it's also important to note that if you look at, rather than a kind of a trend of a 3 or 4 month trend of interest rates, but look at what interest rates have done over the last 40 years, we're still below kind of what you would consider an average during that time. Sure, we're not at the bottom, but we're not even close to being at the top. So it's still, when you look at a larger picture, it's still a good time to look at financing projects. And to that end, we're looking at a 20-year term to try to lock in the lower long-term interest rates today, again, relatively speaking to 4 years.
Thank you.
Okay.
So it's really just a request to say, I've taken some steps, do I keep taking them?
Seems appropriate. It's not going to go down in the short term anyway. I have no idea of forecasting where it's going to go in the longer term.
so when
Well,
we,
it's not going to go down. That's so.
when we do the parameters resolution, usually there's an interest rate range
Mhm.
and a net savings range that we're targeting. So the board has the opportunity to weigh in on the parameters that we're willing to borrow once we get there. But there's some legwork that needs to happen and some resources that need to be gathered in terms of bond counsel and having Concord doing the work for us. So.
Yeah, we're just kind of exploring what the opportunities might be. And the only way to do that is to go out and at least go out into the market and see who might be interested. So that's really what we're doing now.
I think you got a head nod from Word.
Okay. Then we'll keep marching.
All right.
Thank you.
Anything further on your financial report?
Should be enough.
It is. Scary for the rest of us. Okay. Monthly system operations, Andrew.
Sure. So in front of you, you have the May operations data. As far as water production goes, you'll notice a slight increase, and that's just going into the summer months where you're pretty normal in that range. As far as wastewater goes, you're also going to notice a little bit of increase at Klein's Island as well as the smaller wastewater plants. It's really in part due to the precipitation total that you see down there with 5.27 inches in May. That was mainly due to one storm, which we'll somewhat touch on in a little bit. There were no noticeable violations or injury accidents. However, there were 3 either bypasses or SSOs, which we'll touch on in a few seconds. But first, I want to pass it off to Chris to give a little commentary.
Thanks. Notice we have one main break in Allentown. It's pretty insignificant if you look at count wise, but ultimately that was a huge night. If you guys remember, there was a gas leak discovered on Gordon and 9th on May 27th. It was our crews that discovered it while in the process of working on a standard main break. Our guys cracked the ground and started excavating their work and noticed a strong gas smell that was coming from underneath the blacktop. So I just wanted to give special thanks to Anthony Morales, David Diaz, John Mako, and Nate Roush. It was Anthony and David that were in the hole that noticed the smell right away. Got out of the hole, called up quick to Johnny and Nathan, and within 10 minutes, they had Allentown fire on site. UGI was there a few minutes later, evacuated 2.5 blocks of people. And what should have been a 2 or 3 hour job for our guys turned into a 19-hour day. Our guys stayed on site the whole time to make sure we were there to support anybody else that needed it. And when we got the all clear, we subsequently went in and did our work after UGI had finished locating and fixing their gas leak. So UGI estimated that it was leaking for approximately 3 to 4 days at that point and was building up underground. And just by us cracking the blacktop and excavating the dirt, it found its way over to where we were working. It's the low point. So it was about maybe 30, 40 feet northwest of our work location. So I just wanted to give special thanks to our guys out in the street. You know, there was a video on WFNZ showing UGI fixing the leak, but ultimately they were showing LCA fixing our water leak and called it UGI. But in the video, it's all of our men out there in the field in the rain fixing a water leak after they had already found a gas leak. So, you know, you'll never say for sure, but I say we helped avert a huge crisis because this was literally the next day after that Pottsville explosion. So kudos to the field guys out at DNC.
Great job. Thank you. Definitely appreciate their efforts. We need a more reflective logo on the side of our vehicles.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Andrew, you continue?
As I mentioned, we had a fairly large storm in early May, which was 2.2 inches of rain. This did cause a bypass at Heidelberg, which lasted from 5/7 to 5/11. And we also had one at Lynn Township ranging from 5/7 to 5/10. On 5/12, there was an unrelated incident, which was an SSO at air release valve 1 on the Western Lehigh. And that was caught due to a faulty valve. I also wanted to make note of a boil water advisory that occurred 5/14 and was lifted in 5/16. That one was due to an electrical issue, which ultimately caused one of the wells to not recharge the clear well, which ended up with low pressure in the system, and that was fixed and put back into service. I also wanted to make note of a project that Chuck has really been working on, which is the temporary sodium bisulfite system. And that was placed online in mid-May. So we are now able to dechlorinate at Klein's Island, which has been very helpful for fecal coliform deactivation and chlorine residual going out to the Lehigh River.
Thank you. Excellent. All right. At this point, move on to any staff comments.
Yeah, I have just one brief comment that is to thank the board for the support given to me and some staff members who attended the American Water Works Association annual meeting in Texas earlier this month. Chris Mon and Sue Sampson and myself all attended, and I think across the board got a lot out of it, and hopefully we get some additional staff involvement in that in future years. Also, as part of that meeting, attending the Water Utility Council, very beneficial to our organization and getting some advanced information on emerging issues, regulatory and legislative. So just wanted to note that and thank the board for that support.
And recently we had some new word about regulations regarding PFSAs.
Yeah, the notice about EPA's action on PFAS, actually, we received 2 days in advance because of our attendance at the meeting in San Antonio. So we knew it was coming and we're able to pretty quickly prepare our own response and analysis of it. So between myself and Sue Sampson and Andrew from home, working on that and able to respond to that pretty quickly was good result.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Solicitor comments?
No comments, thanks.
All right, this time we open up the floor to any public comments on any issues that they want to speak about. And we see that Jenny has also joined us, so.
Hello, everybody. I'm sorry I was late, but I don't have any comment right now. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jenny. Any other public comments? All right, at this time, we're going to adjourn and this meeting, and at 2 o'clock begin an executive session to deal with potential legal matters.
For Kevin's sake, we do have a separate Zoom that was emailed for the executive session, so we will log out of here and join the other Zoom.
Yeah, I saw that. Thanks, Lisa.
And thanks, everybody.